towards achieving maritime security, safety, and development. Nigeria and other member states of the African Union signed African Charter.
Imo State Governor describes President Buhari's diplomatic shuttle to Germany as highly beneficial to Nigeria.
Information and Culture Minister assures Nigerians that all Chibok schoolgirls in captivity will be released through negotiation.
And today on Good Morning Nigeria, we focus on what Nigeria stands to benefit from the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF.
Well, it is often said that no nation can exist in isolation. As a result, Nigeria is among the 189 member nations of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank Group, also known as the Bretton Woods institutions.
Now, the institutions have a primary mandate to support member nations with funds, fiscal, monetary, and structural policies, as well as technical assistance that could position their economies on the path of growth and prosperity.
Well, in order to achieve the task, the IMF and the World Bank Group monitor developments in member nations and also come up with periodic observations and forecasts on the economic outlook, as well as other development indicators for countries as well as regional blocs.
In addition, the IMF and the World Bank Group equally provide a platform for the 189 member nations to make their inputs to the economic outlook, as well as to enhance international trade and cooperation through, at this time, the World Bank and IMF meetings usually taking place in spring, and then, of course, we have the one that takes place in fall.
Yes. Exactly. While the World Bank commits billions of dollars towards ending extreme poverty and as well as enhancing shared prosperity amongst the bottom 40% of developing nations, population by 2030, well, the IMF appears to have embraced change in facilities currently at 0% for low-income countries, and as well as keep a surveillance and capacity building on each one.
However, one question that remains on the lips of a good number of Nigerians is this: what are the benefits of the IMF World Bank annual meetings to Nigeria and to Nigerians? And to what extent have these benefits ensured economic growth and shared prosperity? Well, we have later with us in the studio one person who should know, in addition, of course, to other guests who will be contributing to the conversation. These and some other talking points will be raised on the program later on. I am Kingsley Osadola, and on that note, I welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria.
My name is Blessing Abu. Yes, it's the first edition for the working week, and I join Kingsley in welcoming you to the program today. And also asking you to join the discussion via our Twitter handle, that's at NTAGMN. That's when the discussion starts in earnest. Well, as usual on the program, this is coming to you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. And in the course of the program, of course, we'll find out you could also have some other segments, which will include a newspaper review, the business reports, sports, foreign, as well as entertainment news. But here is the news this morning, and our guide is Joseph Johnson. Good morning to you, Joseph.
Good morning, Blessing. Thanks for joining us on the news desk at this hour. Nigeria and other member states of the African Union have signed an African Charter on Maritime Security, Safety and Development in Lomé, Togo. Professor Shibajo, who represented President Muhammadu Buhari at the summit, noted that the blue economy is one of the major areas of focus of the Charter, adding that without security benefits derivable from around the waters is jeopardized by such maritime crimes like piracy and smuggling. The Vice President noted, for instance, that the Gulf of Guinea and the Horn of Africa in particular are areas where there had been a lot of piracy, as in Nigeria's case. By signing the Charter, African leaders intend to improve security of the coasts and hope to inspire greater coordinated economic activities and development. The Charter is meant to ensure improved information sharing between coastal countries and others in Africa. a gap pirates and smugglers have taken advantage of in their movements and operations on African waters. Out of the 54 AU African countries, 38 are coastal. Governor Rochas Okorocha of Imo State has described the recent diplomatic shuttle by President Muhammadu Buhari to the Republic of Germany as fulfilling and highly beneficial to Nigeria. Addressing newsmen on the outcome of the visit, the governor, who was part of the president's delegation to Berlin, appealed to Nigerians to exhibit high sense of understanding, patriotism and support to the nation's rebuilding process.
The nation is passing through a very trial moment now, very difficult times, ranging from economic, security, and political challenges. We have challenges in our land. I do not think that those were the intentions as been described on social media and has been described by all and sundry. There's need to change our attitude completely. If this issue had been an issue how to move Nigeria forward, you won't see this on social media. You will not see comments on it. Nobody will talk about it. If it's an issue on how to put power back to Nigeria, nobody will comment. Everybody will keep quiet. But once it's anything that is perceived to be negative, Nigerians are awake. And this is the time that all Nigerians, irrespective of political party, religious culture, must come together to see what we can do to salvage the situation and to build the Nigeria of our collective hopes and aspirations.
In the meantime, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has assured Nigerians that the release of the 21 Chibok girls from captivity is the first leg of negotiations to secure the release of all the girls and others still in captivity. The minister, who also cautioned people to refrain from statements that could jeopardize the current negotiation for the release of the remaining Chibok girls, was speaking at a special church service in honor of the released Chibok girls in Abuja.
And I want to seize the opportunity again to once again reassure the world that the girls were released. It was not a swap, and the government did not pay 1 penny. And this is just the beginning. And we are very optimistic that inshallah, very soon, another batch bigger than this will be released to us.
Now, as Nigeria joins other nations to mark World Food Day, the effect of climate change on agriculture remains a major threat to global food security. Reports from the Food and Agriculture Organization indicate that farmers, fishermen and pastoralists are being hit by higher temperatures and increasing weather-related disasters. It is in the light of these that the 2016 World Food Day is focusing on the impact of climate change on food security.
Nearly 800 million people remain food insecure nowadays. Almost 106 million children under the age of 5 are stunted.
3,000-4,000 hectares, young men or women have 2 hectares each. There you can teach them things, give them resources, have harvesters, tractors to hire, and processing and what have you. And then we can achieve what the Europeans call traceability.
Former Head of State General Abdul Salami Abubakar says it is the collective responsibility of all Nigerians to promote unity and tackle the challenges confronting the country. General Abdul Salami stated this in Abeokuta, where he received an award of honorary doctorate degree in public administration from one of the private universities in Nigeria.
Those in authorities at various levels, responsible citizens and elders in positions of leadership across this country must put hands on deck to assist in working for, in promoting, and in sustaining the creation of peaceful environment.
And Nigerians have been enjoined to look up to God in order to overcome the various challenges confronting the country. This was the central message at the grand finale of the 20th anniversary of Nigeria Praise, championed by former Head of State General Yakubu Gowon.
As a people, to offer praise to God and proclaim His Lordship over Nigeria.
God's ability, God's grace to save us in spite of us.
Talking religious matters, the President General Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, Alhaji Sa'ad Abubakar, has stressed the need for people to contribute to the construction of the House of God to enhance the teachings of the Word of God. Alhaji Sa'ad Abubakar said these at the foundation laying of the Palace Mosque in Ayede Ekiti in Oye Council area of the state.
Among Muslims everywhere, not only in Nigeria, all over the world, particularly in our own country. You know the challenges we are facing in this country. But with unity, by speaking with one voice, we will be in a position to address all the outstanding issues.
Qiyamah is the benefit of Islam. They don't tell you that, well, if you are a Muslim, you will be rich or poor. But what they say is that if you are a good Muslim and you practice your religion the way you're supposed to practice it, you will gain eternal life.
Sticking out to Kano State, where the federal government has warned the contractor handling the hydropower generation project in Tiga Dam in Kano State to abide by international safety regulations to protect the dam from collapse. This is coming as the Galma Dam project in Kaduna State is completed and ready for power generation.
We stopped the blasting. We reduced the power generation capacity because it was over-assumed. The actual amount of power, water that is available is not enough for the original plan that the Kano State government had about the power requirement for this dam and Chalao Gorge Dam. So we had to do things very scientifically and reduce the power requirements.
Turning to China now, where Nigeria will co-host the 14th session of the China International SME Fair in Guangzhou with China in 2017. This is to expose the country's growing small and medium businesses to international partners in development. Director General Small and Medium Enterprises Agency of Nigeria, Diko Umaru Rada, in his address at the 13th China International SME Seminar in Guangzhou said exposure will help Nigerian SMEs package their products well to attract international attention and reach global market standards.
Government for enable us to participate and co-host the 14th edition of SISMIP. A large number of the delegations from Nigeria will participate, and their participation will enable them to go home with something like innovations, knowledge, experiences, and collaborations, creating opportunities for the small businesses in Nigeria to see the relevant opportunities that are in China and to collaborate and cooperate and create a more robust business opportunities for our small and medium businesses.
And that's the news that there's. Stay with us here at NTA for more news as the day progresses. For now, Good Morning Nigeria continues with Blessing and Kinsley. After the break, stay with us.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
With free basics, one opportunity leads to many. Dial *141# to get Jobberman, Airtel One Touch, and many more without data charges. only on Airtel.
The NTA ETV National Children's Expo for Scientific, Technological and Artistic Inventions is in its 10th edition. We are set to make history again, live at the NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja, with the theme Improved Technology and Impetus for Mechanized Agriculture, Renewable Energy and Economic Development of the Nation. Date, Sunday, October 23rd to Thursday, October 27, 2016, 9 a.m. each day. As usual, this event is open only to junior categories of ages 6 to 12 years and senior categories of 13 to 18 years in both arts, science or technology. Participants must be in the school system. Are you ready to be a part of the biggest gathering of Nigerian children with creative and innovative ideas? Note, all NTA stations nationwide are implored to complete their preliminary competitions ahead of the Abuja event in October.
It's here again. It's the 11th Biennial Conference of Africa Broadcasters, TAG Africast, organized by the National Broadcasting Commission. In Nigeria, we say better soup na money kill 'em. In Africast, we know this. That's why the theme of Africast 2016 is Digital Terrestrial Broadcasting, the imperative of financing quality content. With over 60 participating countries, over 2,000 participants, local and foreign exhibitors, Africast is the most vibrant market for broadcasters, policymakers, content producers, equipment manufacturers, exhibitions, panel discussions and master classes. Date from October the 18th to 20th, 2016. Abuja Sheraton Hotel and Towers host Africa's 2016. Time 9 a.m. daily. See you there. Africast. Investment, content, technology.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we are live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, agriculture is our focus on business news today as inflation rises to almost 18%. Let's have the details of these stories with our correspondent, Leah Katung Babatunde.
The federal government says it is contemplating a total ban on the importation of rice, a staple food in Nigeria, to encourage local production of the commodity. This is part of efforts to curb the negative impact of large-scale importation on that sector, which is not self-sufficient. The call for a robust rice production is to bring down the cost and improve income.
We have taken steps to ensure that women continue with processing, particularly for market that is sold, rice that is sold locally, so that their incomes are increased significantly.
However, Minister of Agriculture Audogbe, who spoke to journalists in Abuja, said access to credit is still a fundamental problem to farmers of the commodity.
The commercial banks are not playing ball. The rate at which they want to lend money to you is not repayable, so they are not for agri. So we are depending now on the anchor borrowers program of the CBN. But by the end of this year, we would have reformed the Bank of Agric, and interest rates will not exceed 7%.
Meanwhile, in September, the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation across the country, increased by 17.9% year-on-year, up from the 17.6% recorded in the previous month. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, energy and energy-related prices continued to be the largest increases reflected in the cost-up index. It stated that in September, the cost-up index increased by 17.7%, up from 0.5 percentage points from rates recorded in August. During the month of the review, the highest increases were seen in the electricity, liquid fuel, solid fuels and lubricants for personal transportation equipment groups. Communication and restaurants and hotels recorded the lowest rates of increase of the 12 divisions, growing by 5.6% and 9.6%. The Bureau noted that the food sub-index increased by 16.6% year-on-year in September, up by 0.19 percentage points from rates recorded in August. It stated that a number of groups within the food index recorded falls in the rate of price increases, including fish, which had previously been a key driver, as well as oils and fats and fruits. The NBS said price movements recorded by the all items less farm produce or cost-up index increased by 17.7% year-on-year in September, up by 0.5 percentage points from rates recorded in August. The corresponding 12-month year-on-year average percentage change for the urban index increased from 13.6% in August to 14.4% in September, while the corresponding rural index also increased from 12% in August to 12.6% in September. And as the World Food Day is being celebrated around the globe, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization FAO has called on countries to address food and agriculture in their climate action plans and invest more in rural development. FAO's Director General Jose Graziano da Silva said in Rome that the FAO's vision is that climate change, extreme poverty, and hunger must be addressed altogether, and sustainable agriculture is key to doing so.
Sustainable agriculture is key to doing so. Agricultural activities that are resilient and result in a sustainable management of natural resources can deliver the transformative change we so urgently need.
The theme for World Food Day 2016 is Climate is Changing, Food and Agriculture Must Too. It highlights food security as one of the biggest issues related to climate change. According to FAO, to feed a growing population ensures the well-being of ecosystems and reduce emissions. Agriculture and food systems will need to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change and become more resilient, productive, and sustainable. With Business News, I'm Leah Katung Babatunde.
Many thanks, Leah Katung Babatunde. Up next is a newspaper review segment.
Bayo Atoyebi, newspaper reviewer, is right here with us for today's edition. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Kinsley. How was your weekend?
It was cool. Well, I hope that your weekend was cool as well.
Yes. Good morning, Blessing.
Good morning.
Yeah,
we've had lashing rains in the evenings in Abuja for a couple of days now. We had it on Saturday. We also had it yesterday.
Well, welcome development because the heat was getting too much at the point.
It is usually the norm when the rains are getting towards the seeding and towards the end of the year.
Absolutely. But yesterday's was quite phenomenal. And
I wish it had reached our place. You were lucky.
All right. Have you seen Blessing this morning?
Yes, he's seen me, Kingsley. Never mind. All right, we'll start off with the Punch newspaper for a review this morning. Leading for the Punch, we have the story about the Chibok girls. Chibok girls recount ordeal as they reunite with parents. You find that story on page 7. Also looking in that direction. For 1 month and 10 days, we stayed without food and narrowly escaped a bomb blast in the forest. Boko Haram ready to negotiate release of 83 more. This is coming from the federal government. Still on the Chibok girls, the Nation reported this way. Chibok girls, we stayed without food for 40 days. And 2 riders stood out how my daughter got a baby by father. And jubilation at reunion. Of course, you have the photograph splashed across there for the actually. See one being back by her mother. I think that's quite touching.
That's right. That's right. Blessed. We also have the photo stories on the front pages of the 3 papers that I have. Daily Trust, for instance, the lower half of the front page has it. Chibok girls reunite with parents and narrate ordeal. You can see the photographs there. 4 photographs of the Chibok girls and their families at a special Thanksgiving service that took place in Abuja yesterday. Now, you also have that on the front page of The Guardian. It says some of the free Chibok girls during the Thanksgiving service that took place at the office of the DSS, according to The Guardian. And then for Vanguard newspaper, the photographs are also there on the front page, in addition, of course, to another story that is on the right side, right-hand column of the front page. Boko Haram ready to negotiate release of 83 Chibok girls. That's according to the federal government. Details of that story can be found on page 6. Bio.
Yes, tears of joy flooded the area yesterday from the 21 Chibok girls, their parents, and well-wishers at the Thanksgiving. In fact, many must have joined in the empathic tear shedding, even in the homes as people watch television. Mothers and children all were captured by the emotions. The men stole out of the sitting room so as not to be seen to be weeping in the public for it. Everybody was overwhelmed. However, Gloria Dim, one of the girls who spoke on behalf of the 21 liberated girls, said that there was an instant they had to go 40 days without food. She once narrowly even escaped a bomb blast, and she says that they attribute their return and survival as an act of God. We pray that God touches the heart of Boko Haram to enable them release our other colleagues. Minister of Information, who was there with the Minister for Women Affairs, Ajay Juma Al-Hassan, also cautioned on comments that could jeopardize the release of the other 197 girls. Chairman, Parents Abducted Girls of Chibok, Yakubu Nkeki, pleaded that false speculation on social media should stop so as not to endanger the return of the girls. He said he has read a report that 18 of the girls were pregnant. He said it is not true. And one of the girls who was actually carrying a baby, the father testified that the girl was pregnant when she was adopted. Actually, she has just married, but because she failed her West Africa Examination Council, she had registered to retake the examination when she was adopted. And so the father was gladly reunited with the daughter and the new granddaughter. Former President General Ibrahim Babangida says that the release is a sign of hope for the nation. He also emphasized that the professionalism and capabilities of the armed forces is not in doubt, and they will be able to stem the insurgency, kidnapping, armed robbery, and all sorts of criminality that is bedeviling our nation.
Okay, let's go over to some other stories now. For the nation now, just above the masses, we have some other stories. Sultan seeks better treatment of minorities. That story you find on page 12. And from page 7 is a story about the Joint Admission Matriculation Board appealing to the Senate, don't amend our act. And Nigerians misunderstood Buhari, a wife. This is coming from Imo State Governor, Richard Okorocha, but you find that story on page 5. Still on the Joint Admission Matriculation Board story, there is another story on the front page of the Punch, just at the foot of the page. You have jam scraps use of scratch cards. That's what you find on page 9. And two other stories there. Arrested judges, lawyer sues DSS, AGF, others for 50 billion naira. And you find that story on page 11. Sultan canvasses better treatment for minorities, just as you have seen in the nation. Kingsley?
All right, let's go to Vanguard newspaper now. Vanguard newspaper, lead story says, with a kicker, crackdown on judges. Again, presidency backs DSS, says it followed the law. And two writers to that, you are responsible for our travails, judges accuse Malami. Malami is the Attorney General of the Federation. And lawyer files 500 billion naira suit against Buhari, AGF, DSS, and IGP. And also there on the front page, just below those riders, I want Nigerians against voting for Buhari. That's according to Senator Okuruamu. Details on pages 44 and 45. Above the nameplate of Vanguard, two other headlines. CBN monetary operations suck 1.4 trillion naira from banks in September. Page 52 for details. And I slept with 6 other ladies, says man accused of infecting girlfriend with HIV. Details of that story on page 9. It's actually an Irish in Lagos. Bayo?
Yes, let's start with the story that broke last week. Governor Richard Okorocha, who was the president, Muhammadu Buhari's delegation to West Germany, says that the views of the wife of the president expressed in the interview has been taken out of context. And Mrs. Aisha Buhari meant to make peace within the hierarchy of the party. And he also added that the president's response, while smiling, was not a denigration of his wife nor women. However, he says in the international community, where heightened awareness is about women's rights, they probably may have understood it. But Nigerians would understand it because it showed and it should not be taken too far. However, spokesman for the president, Garba Shehu, says that the president was only joking when he chuckled that, I don't know which party my wife belongs to. Others say that he was trying to make light the issue raised by his wife interview, where he said his knowledge of the workings of government and surpasses that of his wife and the opposition. Others say that the wife's advice was good, but ought not to have been in the public domain. Women activists have joined the fray with serious condemnation. So are other party members saying that, well, the president's wife has spoken their mind. Unlike commentators have taken various sides. Some say are talking in support, some are talking in condemnation. However, of all the first ladies, wives of former heads of states, former presidents, Aisha Buhari stands out as having the highest academic aptitude. She has a second degree in international relations and strategic studies, as well as postgraduate diploma in cosmetology, right? The talk twisting. If you recall, most of them have operated in the background until the advent of better life for rural women. And all of those subsequent ones have always had a pet program or the other. Again, if you look back on the three previous campaign that President Muhammad Buhari had, nobody ever saw his wife on the campaign trail. Even in the last one, she came on the campaign trail almost lately, about halfway before she came in on. And that is why the president, while he was living in Germany in the briefing, just said, well, the role of my wife is to take care of me in the house.
It's captured in that way, just above the master for the point. So
Yes.
my wife's duty is to look after me, Buhari insists. That's where I find on page 9. Well, quickly to some other story now, still on the front page of the Punch. I'm still alive, says Niger cleric with 97 wives. That's where I find on page 13. And still on page 13, curfew imposed on southern Kaduna as herdsmen kill 20.
All right, I was just wondering, just before we leave the subject matter of First Ladies, Bayo was talking about the First Lady with the most academic qualification. He didn't speak on the immediate past First Lady, who also was referred to as a doctor. Was it honoris causa?
It was honoris causa.
So that's important because, you know, the titles were many, usually very many. But of course, before Mrs. Miriam Babangida, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe's wife, Flora, you know, was also very personable. If you take a look at the photographs.
The Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa's wife.
That's right.
Nobody ever saw Alhaji Shehu Shagari's wife.
Well, that's right.
So,
but Shagari was, Nnamdi Azikiwe was ceremonial president and therefore head of state.
Yes.
All right, so let's return to Daily Trust. Daily Trust below the nameplate. Presidential panel justifies judge's arrest. And Bauchi governor invites EFCC to investigate MDAs. That's on page 4. And banks deny manufacturers 60% forex allocation. Now, lead story says with a double-decker headline, APC members crying of neglect. It's attributed to Imo State Governor Rochas Okorocha. And very quickly, for the Guardian newspaper, the Guardian has his lead story. Power sector loses 549 billion naira yearly to gas constraints. And Sultan seeks better deal for minorities. Police rescue 100 hostages and arrest 88 suspects in Bauchi Forest. Now, also there on the second lead story on the front page, why Buhari must rejig cabinet by Okorocha, and First Lady's comment timely and commendable. Now, just an earpiece there says 20 feared dead as suspected Fulani herdsmen attack Gudugudu.
Well, it's very sad, the attack on Gudugudu. In fact, the chairman, interim management committee, Dr. Humble, has imposed a 24-hour curfew on the local government, particularly for the incident that happened in Gudugudu. Gudugudu is an urban town not too far from Kafanchan, where there have been clashes between, some say, herdsmen and farmers. And this has been on for over 10 days now. In fact, I passed through that place on Friday afternoon, and I think that I saw the presence of even a police armored vehicle. And I had thought that maybe things were under calm, but it blew out again. And the dimensions it's taking is quite unhealthy, because they said about 20 people have been killed, including some policemen. Some say it is a clash between the natives there and the settler Hausa Fulani. Others say are giving it even a religious connotation. But quickly, on the issue of the arrest of judges, 2 of the judges have already written an application to the National Judicial Council to seek permission to go to court to seek the restoration of their fundamental human rights. One of the justices, Justice Nnamdi Dingba, has asserted that it's because of he gave rulings against DSS that is also a target. Justice Ademola also said that there is an episode sometime when he was a judge at the Federal High Court in Kano, where he gave indicted the current Attorney General of misconduct. However, the presidency says that rather than resorting to sentiment, the justices should go to court and prove their case.
All right, Mayatibi, thank you very much. We must go now. Just to let you know that dollar scarcity, banks suspend ATM cards usage abroad for those of you looking forward to using your cards as you travel.
Yeah, that's from the Punch newspaper?
That's on the, yes, on the inside page of the Punch newspaper. Mayatibi, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you as always.
See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be another day.
This is Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a break at this point. When we return, it will be time to kickstart a conversation, taking a look at the fallout of the IMF-World Bank annual meeting. Just ended.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too! Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Yes, we're set for a conversation right now on the IMF-World Bank annual meeting. Here is Oyeyemi Ajayi telling us what benefits will there be for Nigeria with some of these meetings.
The IMF and World Bank meet each October in what is officially known as the annual meetings, and in April for the spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank Group. The meetings are customarily held in Washington, D.C., United States for 2 consecutive years and in another member country in the 3rd year. On the weekend of the autumn meetings, the world's 7 most industrialized nations, also known as G7, also meet. Since the mid-1990s, these meetings have remained center points for anti-globalization movement protests. The IMF and World Bank annual meetings bring together central bankers, ministers of finance and development, private sector executives, representatives from civil society organizations, and academics to discuss issues of global concern, from the global economic outlook to poverty eradication, economic development, and aid effectiveness. In the 2016 annual meetings, the managing director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, said so far the meeting has been able to complete the 2010 quota and governance reforms following ratification by the US Congress. Also, members have pledged bilateral borrowing agreements totaling more than $340 billion, which would help to maintain the IMF fire point at around $1 trillion.
Finance ministers can decide to reallocate spending within the same budget envelope toward productivity-enhancing areas. For instance, supporting research and development, financing infrastructure at a time when financing costs are so low.
Likewise, the president of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim, in his view, talked about the need to end extreme poverty by 2030 and to boost shared prosperity for the bottom 40% of the populations in developing countries, while urging global leaders to do all they can to support the poor and the vulnerable.
Research shows that inequality is still far too high, both globally and within countries, constraining growth and breeding instability. We need to focus on growth and continue to reduce inequality.
Nigeria was actively involved in the 2016 IMF-World Bank annual meeting, and the high-powered delegation was led by the finance minister, Kemi Adeosun. The Nigerian delegation was able to reach an agreement on a framework to improve the unacceptably low rate of performance and disbursement of Nigerian portfolios, which currently stands at 13%. Over the years, Nigerians have been skeptical about what Nigeria derives from the international organizations. Some have criticized that the two international development institutions remain biased to what is of interest to advanced economies, while heaping debts on developing nations like Nigeria in the name of borrowing for development with stringent conditionalities. While the influence of IMF could be felt in the nation's financial services sector in pursuit of international monetary system, the World Bank in its part tend to push for eradication of extreme poverty, which could be seen through their contribution in the Northeast Challenge. Well, more light will be shed on this episode of Good Morning Nigeria on the benefits of IMF and World Bank annual meetings to Nigeria.
Oyebi Ajayi, thank you very much there for that elaborate background report. Now we're being joined in the studios here by the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, who also was the leader of Nigeria's delegation to the 2016 IMF World Bank annual meetings in DC. Honorable Minister, a pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
All right, so let's begin straight away. What, in your opinion, are the takeaways for Nigeria in the context of our current economic situation and the pictures painted with regard to the economic outlook for the rest of the world?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it was an interesting period because we were able to get the world view of where the global economy is going and therefore where Nigeria can position itself within that. And the general consensus was that growth is going to be slower. There will be growth, but it's slow growth, and it's going to be an extended period of slow growth. So that's been consistent really with what we've been saying, that we're going to recover, but it's not going to be a very fast, dramatic recovery. It's going to be a slow and steady recovery. But the good news was that the international markets really are awash with capital. A lot of dollar investments are earning negative returns, and those that are even earning positive returns, very low returns. So there's also an opportunity maybe to raise some money because dollar deposits or dollar investments are so cheap, to raise cheap money in order to do infrastructure. A lot of the discussion was around infrastructure as an asset class, especially infrastructure in emerging markets, which of course is music to the ears of Nigerians, because infrastructure is one of the areas that this government has said, look, we need to sort out to get the economy growing. As your intro pointed out, one of the real issues for us was looking at the rate of disbursement of World Bank projects. We discovered that you get a lot of announcements in Nigeria, World Bank to invest this month. But when I became minister, one of the things I did was review the portfolio of World Bank projects, and I discovered that our rate of disbursement is very poor. You have some projects that are 3-4 years old, they've hardly dispersed anything. So it's just almost like an announcement and then nothing happens. So one of the things we said we were going to do was to retool our projects and look at what is the best way to engage World Bank? Because remember, this money is our money. It's almost an entitlement for Nigeria, and it's for us to design the projects that are going to give us the most impact. So we need to understand, why are we dispersing at such a low rate? Our rate of disbursement is just 13%, and the target is 30%. So we're performing about 1/3 of the average. So what we did while we were there was we asked the World Bank, who are the best performing countries? And they gave us, and we went to sit with them to say, okay, what are they doing that we are not doing? What can we do better to make sure that our rate of disbursement on some of these projects is improved? And so what we've done is we've come back, going to review the portfolio. Some projects were designed wrongly from the beginning, so they were always they were doomed to failure. Some projects are not being adequately monitored. So we'll look at our portfolio. Those projects that clearly are irredeemable, let's cancel them, and as you heard Ms. Lagarde say, and then reallocate that money to where it can have the most impact. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing.
All right, Honourable Minister, you also quoted, said some of the very clear action points to be taken. Yes, you've just touched on one, taking a look at the disbursement in the area of low performance for portfolio. Now, let's take a look at some other areas that you touched on. Like part of the report, we just, or at least the background that talked about the outlook for IMF, World Bank. Most of the time, the outlook is as if issue of loans, debt, that is just what they heap on developing nations as against what is happening with the advanced nations. Put in perspective, what exactly we'll be getting this time around, judging from your meetings?
I think that, you know, these engagements, maybe because I don't come from the World Bank community, quote unquote, I come more from a private sector. You get out whatever you know, it's the approach with which the approach you take which will determine your outcomes. We have gone to the World Bank meetings with a laundry list of what we wanted. So when there were specific projects, I said, look, we're doing this, how can you help us? So we took our housing. They committed to investing. We took some of our power projects to them. So I think if you go there saying, what do you have for us? Then that's the situation we found ourselves in, where you get projects that were designed for maybe another country, just brought to Nigeria, and then they fail. We've taken a more proactive approach. Like, okay, what are our priorities in Nigeria? We took our housing project to them. We got a significant amount of commitment from them that, look, we'll support you. We took our infrastructure needs to them. Not only did they agree to support us, the Canadians, the Canadian foreign minister said, oh, we have solved that problem. We will help you to scale up and be able to take advantage of. So we saw this trip as, we went with our own shopping list of what we wanted, and we were very clear about it. And that's why I said, any project that is not performing, if a project has been on since 2012 and it's not performing, let's cut it, because typically the projects are 5 years. If you spend 4 years and you've not disbursed anything, let's reallocate that money to a project that we design, that we want, and then we can move forward. And there are a number in that area. So there's a lot, I think, for Nigerians this time. Let me give you an example of the DBN. DBN was conceived about 3 years ago, a very good project, but it hadn't gone anywhere. This is 2016. We announced it, DBN 1.3, and when we got there, we said, look, what are the problems? There were some bottlenecks. Fortunately, we've been able to solve them. And in fact, yesterday and Saturday, we were on a panel interviewing MD and CFO for the DBN that, look, this thing must take off by January. If it's needed, let's have some urgency. I think that for me is a big difference.
DBN is the name of a television station. Is that what you're referring to, or is Development Bank of Nigeria?
Which incidentally is very important, because it's going to provide money to MSMEs. And for Nigeria, that's really important, because 50% of our GDP is small, medium-sized, petty traders, and so on and so on. So finding a way to get money towards them is a really important part of getting out of the challenges that we currently face. So getting the Development Bank of Nigeria off the ground is a big priority for us, and we've set ourselves a very tight deadline to get that going.
In addition to the Development Bank of Nigeria, what other projects have stalled with regard to the rather paltry 30% disbursement that we have seen over the years?
Oh, there are a number. There are health-related projects, there are flood control. Some of these projects, incidentally, are at state government level. So one of the things that we have to do, which we've agreed, is the NEC meeting, which is where the governors come. I'll be reporting quarterly to NEC and quarterly to FEC. This is the progress. So if a project is really failing, then I think other governors have the right to say to that state governor that, look, you are blocking everybody, let them cancel this project with you and bring to my state. So there has to be a greater sense of responsibility, because these monies are very cheap monies. You know, the interest rates are as low as 1.5%. You have about 20 years to pay. So if a state or a department is fortunate enough to get a World Bank loan, I think they should have some urgency around how it's used. So some of those projects, as I say, they're flood control projects. There are some projects in agric. There's some projects in power that have stalled. There's some irrigation. In fact, one of the successes was that there's a $500 million irrigation project. And that was held up because the counterpart funding, which is Nigeria's contribution of just $4 million, hadn't been paid. So whilst we were there, we called the Minister of Water Resources. He said, no, I've just released the money. And in fact, even the World Bank people were very excited, because it means that project now, and $500 million for irrigation projects is going to improve our agriculture, is going to create jobs. So there are quite a few takeaways that are positive.
Okay, let's take a look at some other areas. Of course, there were issues of policy, especially in terms of the meeting for the International Monetary and Financial Committee. There were aspects of policies that were raised. I'm sure you want to talk about that. In what direction or what consideration will you be given, especially for some policies that are actually affecting foreign exchange and all of that?
Well, I mean, monetary and fiscal policies obviously were discussed within the global context, and clearly the commitment and the need is for more harmonisation. And both myself and Central Bank Governor, who attended most of those meetings jointly, are in agreement that, look, when the global economy is in flux, there will be need to adjust certain policies as you implement them. And we both made that commitment that, look, if we implementing a policy in a policy direction, we have to keep on monitoring it and make sure that it's actually delivering what we expect. And if it's not, then you have to begin to adjust that. So I think you'll see adjustments on both sides towards our objective, which is really getting the economy back into growth.
What should Nigerians begin to look at for particularly analysts of the economic and financial system in terms of the point you made earlier that one of the outcomes of this year's IMF World Bank meetings is that you now realize you have idle funds out there that could also be accessed. Earlier we had heard reports of Nigeria seeking to borrow either from China or borrow from elsewhere. Now, how does this realign the government borrowing priorities, if I may put it that way?
Yes, I mean, there's no change in the priorities because we really just want to borrow for our infrastructure. What we're looking at is how can we take advantage of the fact that the international capital markets are awash with money. Nigeria has a very decent credit rating. We spent some time with the rating agencies. So how can we leverage Nigeria's balance sheet to borrow money that we can use for infrastructure, and what are the instruments we can use? And as I explained to you that, you know, we're getting some help from the Canadians who were able to create a PPP platform that was able to invest in roads and airports and ports that have helped to develop their economy. So those are the sort of things. I don't think we're going to change our priority. We expect to pay less for dollars because, of course, dollars are a lot cheaper, and therefore I think the only thing that will be accelerated is that we will refinance some of the naira that we're owing into dollars, because most of the naira that we're owing, the interest rate is quite high, and if the international rates are lower, as long as we can put some hedge against foreign exchange risk, then we're looking at the possibility of refinancing.
If you say, and you've just said that the government is looking to borrow in order to finance infrastructure. Now, is this a retention of the age-old paradigm of government taking the lead in infrastructure, or you are exposing the infrastructure subsector to private sector investment?
Both. The government must lead. I think that's very, very important. The government, and this was a message that resonated in DC among other countries, because of course it's not just Nigeria. That government must lead, but government must not be the sole provider of infrastructure. And the platform of PPP, which is the next level after government, comes PPP, which is government, private and public, before you go fully private. So we need to get to the point where PPP is working very effectively, and that's the area in which, as I said, we're taking some technical help from some of the other governments who've succeeded in developing a very strong PPP platform. Now, what that will do is allow, for example, pension fund money to be invested in infrastructure assets on a partnership basis, because it is partial government money and partial private money, and we're working very closely with the Minister of Power, Works and Housing to identify some of the pilot projects that we'll do under that. Now what that will do is make our budget seem bigger, because we'll be spending not only budget money, but then we will also be able to crowd in private money to add to that and accelerate the rate of infrastructure rollout, which of course is what will get us growing again.
Okay. For at least observers still, there are also takeaways from the World Bank meeting, and this time around taking a look at what have been termed a takeoff of the $500 million Northeast social safety nets.
Yes.
How does that begin to translate?
That again is part of the borrowing plan that was approved by the Federal Executive Council. I think it was about 4 weeks ago. We're now going to have to engage very quickly with the National Assembly to get that approved so that we can sign and draw down that money. And the idea is, of course, to try and start dispersing so that we can rebuild family life in the Northeast, which has of course been devastated. We thank God for the progress that's been made, but there is a need to rebuild, and that region needs a lot of money to rebuild, and the World Bank and indeed other development partners are very keen to support the work that's going on there.
Well, I was just wondering, Blessing, what the Honourable Minister has talked about would, again, to put it broadly, the issues coming from the executive side, executive branch. When you're seeking to borrow, you will need legislative approval. When you're seeking to prepare a budget, you will need, excuse me, you will need legislative approval. Now, to what extent the legislature piggyback on this trip to the DC meetings? Are you on the same page?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the Senate Chairman on Finance and House Chairman on Finance were all there. On the delegation, which is usual because there's a section for legislature. It's early in the morning. There's a section for the legislature, and they had some sessions as well. So of course we're all aligned, and when we finish, we all have wrap-up meetings. So they're there. The Senate Chairman on Finance and House Chairman on Finance. So they're the ones who will then take that message back to our legislature to say, look, this is the support, this is the role you need to play in getting these approvals out quickly so that we can access these funds.
Well, very quickly, what would you say is the likely knock-on effect on the preparation of the 2017 budget on the basis of whatever indices you have picked up from these recent meetings?
I things on the agenda is a briefing. We'll go back and brief the economic management team on what the outcome of the World Bank and IMF meetings were. I suspect that what the difference might be is in the composition of the borrowings and some of the projects that we have pushed with the World Bank and got commitments on. Obviously, they must also then be in the budget, because we don't want a situation where, like the example I gave with water, where they were ready, but because we hadn't put the counterpart funding in our own budget for 2 years, this project was stalled. So we're going to make sure that any project that the World Bank have said we're going to fund, if there's a counterpart requirement, it must be in the 2017 budget so that we can make sure that we meet the criterion and get access to this money. Because we had said, as far as borrowing was concerned, we always want to go for the cheapest. You always go for the cheapest money first, which is why when people are broke, you first ask your friends, because they won't charge you interest before you go to the bank. So obviously World Bank are our friends. We're a member of the World Bank. We've been contributing over the years, and so we must take advantage. And one of the things that was very interesting, and I must share this, when I went to ask them which country draws down the most from World Bank, I was shocked to discover, and I'm sure you'll be shocked, China. China that come here and offer us loan actually draw down huge amounts from the World Bank. They're very efficient at it. So we sat down and said, what do? They have a template, because their argument is that 40% actually of the world's poor, even though China seems like a rich country, are actually in China. So they qualify for this concessional money and they take it very seriously. So I was thinking, if China can have the highest disbursement rate, what would Nigeria's excuse be for lagging down where we are?
How do you, Honourable Minister, intend to deal with, because it's always been there's been a perception that we've had, and it's lingered for well over 30 years, that the Bretton Woods institutions, particularly the IMF, the economy. So the rosy picture you paint now would seem to jar the nerves of, the academics, and the intelligentsia in the third world who would say, look, this is good news after all. Once you interrogate the modus operandi of these two institutions. What's your reaction?
I think there are two things. Now, the IMF have what is called a program. And that is when you get into real trouble as a country, and then the IMF becomes the lender of last resort. Now, when you enter an IMF program, which I think Nigeria has never incidentally been in an IMF program. It was threatened. Nigeria's view has always been, look, let us sort our problems out ourselves. And even though they would offer a lot of money quickly, the conditions are often fatal conditions. So we've taken the approach that we need to solve our own problem. That's always been my view. If you don't take ownership for the solution to a problem, you will never really get the credit for getting out of it. As a country, it'll be as if, well, IMF came to rescue us. We feel that, look, yes, the easiest thing to do is to go to IMF and collect money, but it would come with so much conditionality, and then we'd lose control as a nation of our destiny. What we need to do is, and which is what we're doing as a nation, we're taking our pain ourselves. So the only thing to make sure is that we do get out of the situation that we're in. Now, when you don't borrow from the IMF, you can still engage with them for technical support, and we are doing that, but we're not borrowing from the IMF. Now, the World Bank is different. The World Bank, what we've applied for is budget support. It doesn't come with that conditionality. It's just low-cost loans. So other countries too have accessed it, and it's something that we are entitled to, and it's cheap money relative to the commercial windows. So we're going to take full advantage of it.
All right, Honourable Minister, when we return from this break, we'll take on more issues with yourself as well as other guests that will be joining you on the program. But meanwhile, coming for you, we'll take them right away.
That's right.
Okay, from Sani Omakoji, it says, at least we can see some pockets of World Bank project around, but IMF is like cutting the nose to spite the face. And still with Sani, IMF performance in Nigeria thus far has been nothing but disaster, enslavement, and aiding capital flight in disguise.
And then we have this tweet from Mike Anyako. It says, IMF and World Bank loans to Nigeria are an economist's nightmare. Emphatically, we have not seen the benefits because of corruption.
And from Ortega, it says the two institutions, IMF and the World Bank, is benefiting or are benefiting the interests of the Western governments.
Yeah, so another one from Ortega says the World Bank and IMF continue to destroy Africa because of bad leadership. And unfortunately, the two institutions are not helping matters. All right, so but that's we'll take
those are the
tweets we'll take in the meantime. Those are the tweets we're taking in the meantime. We'll go on this short break. When we return, we'll still have with us the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, and a couple of other guys who will be joining the conversation.
Who are you, and what is your predicament?
Please, I'm looking for Kande. Who is living here? In this compound?
Oh no, this is a premises. The compound is an amalgam of chemicals, and there is no candy living in this premises.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Funky Malam, Bimbo Akintola, Ime Bishop, Yomi Fash Lanso, MC for God.
Who was you? What was you found?
Auntie, I look at you. I going to look for my sister. I know you are poor.
Here. You was found the place. Call me. Okay?
Say somebody.
She's definitely not my sister.
Shut up!
Professor John Bull, fasten your seatbelts this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times. It's absolutely bombastic.
Over and out. The largest data network, Glow, grandmasters of data.
We intend to radically change Newman Street. My company has a track record of converting slums into new cities. Many years of experience has taught us to fish out allies within the communities we want to transform.
Don't listen to your husband. Listen to me. Give me a boy. And the two of you may never even have to work again.
sharp guy. How are you? What's your name? Akpos. America. Oh, Akpos America.
Yeah,
wow.
Love it too.
Wonderful wonder. Wonderful wonder. Wonderful.
In the heart of Abuja is Barcelona Hotels, a hotel that satisfies your every need. Our rooms are exquisitely furnished with state-of-the-art deco, top-notch room service, and our restaurant and bar. Ooh la la.
Sounds good to me.
Our halls are spacious and affordable for your meetings and special occasions. A fully equipped gym and laundry services are at your disposal.
I'm very happy about that.
Feel the thrill at the Barcelona Rooftop Restaurant and Garden with an amazing 360 degrees view of Abuja and an attractive lighting display at night for your relaxation and pleasure, while enjoying sounds from our live band.
Yay!
Totally awesome. Treat yourself to these and much more at Barcelona Hotel, located at number 23, Blantyre Street, off Ademola Adetokunbo Crescent, Wuse 2, Abuja. Dial 0814-137-5819
or 0700 Barcelona.
For more info and bookings.
Email info@barcelonahotelsnigeria.com.
Barcelona Hotels, serving our guests the best way.
You're live on the network service of the NTA. The program is Good Morning Nigeria. Taking a look today on our episode, we have the IMF-World Bank annual meeting, of course. It's just ended, and we've been talking with the Honorable Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun. But joining us on the set this morning, we have other guests, and we'll introduce them right away. We have in the studio here in Abuja, Director of Monetary Policy, Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Moses Tule. It's our pleasure to have you on the program.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Good morning.
We also have joining us from Sokoto. We'd like to welcome Malam Rufai Shehu of the Department of Economics, Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto. Malam Rufai Shehu, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Also, the last but certainly not the least, we have Head of Business, Manager News, Head of Business and Economy for the NTA, News 24, Cliff Ayoze, who just covered the event as well in Washington DC. Mr. Ayoze, welcome to the program.
It's indeed my pleasure.
Okay.
All right. Well, gentlemen, once again, you're welcome. Let's begin the second segment with Dr. Tule, Director of Monetary Policy. We've always had you on the program when issues have arisen with regard to monetary policy management in the Nigerian economy. From your perspective, what were the takeaway lessons from the recent IMF World Bank annual meetings, as those outcomes might impact on our monetary policy framework?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. And once again, good morning, Nigerians. I think permit me to start from some little explanation that the IMF and World Bank were necessary institutions created after World War II. They were created to fill an existing gap at that time. There was this devastation of the entire infrastructure in Europe following the World War, and then the collapse of the financial system along with it. So these institutions were created. The World Bank was created to take care of the infrastructure side, to re-establish the functioning infrastructure that had broken down, and the IMF to take care of the macroeconomic management, which had become completely disorderly and disoriented following the war. So the global community has moved on since 1942. These institutions have assumed a more international role. The World Bank looking at development, especially for developing countries and emerging countries. They do the same where the need arises for the more advanced economies. The IMF, especially whether they are advanced economies or emerging economies or developing countries, looks at the issue of macroeconomic management across board. That is why you have IMF teams visiting countries every night, 2 times a year, to look at the macroeconomic management framework and what the issues are, to ensure that there's no disorderly adjustment of the global financial system, the kind of thing you had after World War II. Now, against that background, you when I listened to the tweets after the Honorable Minister spoke and the kind of apathy Nigerians have towards the IMF, I think it's completely some kind of misunderstanding of what role the IMF does play. The IMF is there to help any country that runs into a crisis. It's like the lender of last resort. The IMF comes and says, look, we think these are the issues you are having with your economy, and this is what you can do, this is what you can do, this is what you can do, so that the shocks that are emanating from your economy will not affect the rest of the economies. And especially for a country like Nigeria that is in a very strategic position around the economies around us here. When we have shocks, the economies, all the economies around us here experience that shock. So the IMF would be there to say, look, do this, so that you don't export your domestic shocks to other countries so that they don't have a problem, and that problem becomes systemic, and then global. I think this, by way of background, that is where we are coming from.
I'm sorry, Dr. Tule. Let me just, I asked the question with regard to the Nigerian environment.
I understand.
It's some polemical issue. I'm sure you were in this environment 30 or so years ago during the Babangida administration. There was a heated debate as to whether or not Nigeria should proceed with the IMF loan in 1985. And that was on account of the experience of a number of countries that had accessed IMF facilities with the stringent conditionalities. We had a number of structural adjustment programs, and these economies collapsed headlong. So, but what is it that we are doing with regard to the Nigerian environment? That was my question.
Yes, I perfectly understood your question. I did crave your indulgence to provide that background, which I think we needed. Even the 1985 structural adjustments were absolutely necessary. Well, now, let's look at the Nigerian environment. From the viewpoint of monetary policy, just like the Honorable Minister did infer when she spoke, the issues concerning monetary policy were handled from a global perspective. You did mention the IMF, the International Monetary and Finance Committee, which says the global policy agenda or policy framework for global finance or macroeconomic management with respect to the financial sector. And these are very high-level meetings. And in these meetings, you articulate, you look at what the global shocks are and where the shocks are coming from. Which countries are emitting those shocks? Which regions are emitting those shocks? What can we do? What is the implications of those shocks on the rest of the world? And then what we then do is, what must the global community do with respect to monetary policy? What works and what does not work? With respect to Nigeria, we can only infer from the general framework that was discussed even at the IMF. Otherwise, the more specific decisions are decisions that would be anchored from the global perspective, from the IMF side, for the rest of the world. Like you're talking about exchange rate. They wouldn't tell you that you should go and fix your exchange rate. So the flexibility of the exchange rate is still very cogent, still very, very important. And within the flexibility, what is a take-home for us? Flexibility of the exchange rate has to be anchored within the framework of the general macroeconomic reforms against other economic reforms. And I think this much, again, the Honorable Minister made reference to when she spoke. So if we distill exchange rate management, for instance, that's the framework against which it was discussed.
All right, Dr. Sule, we'll come back to some of those areas that were raised as priorities, even at this meeting. Earlier we introduced Malam Rufai Shehu of the Department of Economics from the University of Usman Danfodio University, I beg your pardon, in Sokoto. Now, let's have your own perspective. Yes, the IMF-World Bank annual meeting has just ended. Of course, so many things have been discussed, and looking at the trajectory moving forward, what's your own perception of what is happening, especially with the apathy that has been raised about these Bretton Woods institutions?
I would like to start by trying to look at the actual reasons that led to the formation of this Bretton Woods agreement or institutions. These institutions were established in order to tackle a problem that happened as a result of the Great Depression of the 1930s. And if you look at it, in the countries that form these Bretton Woods institutions have succeeded in whatever reason that led to the formation of the same institutions. But my own opinion, the problem actually is not with the Bretton Woods institution, but rather with the structural imbalances that are happening in Nigeria, and it is obvious that whatever policy is designed by the Bretton Woods institutions, when it is now taken to Nigerian environment, the application of it will definitely fail. That is the actual issue. So Nigeria always has to, Nigeria has to understand that what is required is for us to look at our macroeconomic aggregates, look at some kind of policies that we implement which are not good for our own economy, and that is the only way that we can have our economy being responsive to whatever policy that is given to us by the international monetary institutions. For example, the loan that should be given to Nigeria in order to invest in certain sectors of the economy, as the minister rightly said, are quite all right, good, because they have a very minimal interest rate and a very long period of time to which the repayment can be effected. But somebody who sent a tweet said those policies will never work because of what? Corruption. That is the issue. And we need to really come back home and accept what the Bretton Woods institution said to Nigeria, come back and make more structural reforms. And if you do that, definitely whatever policy package you may end up using, it will definitely work.
All right, Malam Rufai Shehu, thanks a lot for your comments. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Earlier, we introduced Cliff Ayozie, of course, is one of us who also sits here sometimes as a presenter of Good Morning Nigeria. Cliff, you are a veteran of a number of these IMF and World Bank meetings. From your perspective, what is unique, or what was, in past tense now, unique about this year's gathering in D.C.?
Thank you, Kingsley. Well, going to the 2016 annual meeting in Washington, I was a bit apprehensive. Apprehensive why? Because we're an economy in recession. How would the world, relate with us? That was my taking at that time. But getting there, we see that Nigeria became the beautiful bride. People were ready to support us. In what areas would you need assistance? And that's exactly what they were talking about. And I also found out that, well, I think most of our potentials are not out there in the public domain. In Nigeria, in the non-oil sector, we have 34 commercially viable minerals that nations ordinarily could key into. And we have a gathering of 189 countries that make up the membership of IMF and the World Bank. And you have to network to get the best from them. And Nigeria had a clear-cut program or kind of mandate going to that very meetings, where the finance minister led, and a lot of meetings that were involved in 2 panel discussions centering on infrastructure, towards better infrastructure in developing nations and making infrastructure rewarding. Well, be it at the meeting of G24, be it at the meeting of G20, the Commonwealth, the African Conference Finance Ministers meeting, Nigeria was well represented. And in fact, most of the journalists and guests tried to relate with us to know what is unique about our country. And that gave me a lot of joy. But one takeaway I will talk about that, they drew attention to the challenge of commodity prices, because Nigeria is one of those countries that is affected by the low pricing of oil and other commodities, as the case may be. And we had the Secretary General of OPEC for the first time, being part of that meeting, and had a dialogue with the Managing Director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde. And an agreement was reached to have an energy dialogue annually, where they would try to bring out World Oil Outlook, what they refer to as World Oil Outlook, to look at developments in the oil and gas sector as to benefit member nations or oil-producing nations, as the case may be. And also, the IMF is quite aware of the apprehension about what what they do in terms of the conditionalities and relation with developing nations. In fact, during one of the media briefing by the managing director of IMF, Christine Lagarde, a question was raised about bias against developing nations. And in fact, she said, look, that she had this impression, people have continued to raise such issue. And that's why during her tenure in the last 5 years, that IMF has undergone some kind of reforms, in the area of ensuring that there is no financial crisis, in the area of the loan facilities, surveillance, and what have you. And that, in fact, led to the extension of the zero interest rate to concessional facilities to developing nations to enable them, develop and engage in projects that will be of benefit to the populace. And extending to other areas, the building capacities of the world, because they put in, they submitted that we're in a world, the economy is in transition, that this transition is looming ahead. And this kind of transition is driven by innovation and technology. And if nations are left behind, that, well, those nations will not be able to go into the digital economy that is prevalent at present. And Nigeria has not benefited from that very program. And one of the meetings, the talking points, the meeting with Nigerian delegation led by the finance minister, was the need for Nigeria to be part of that very program, because already 17,000 personnel have been trained in that and have benefited from that very program from 184 countries. And Nigeria is not in that list. But we had a breakthrough in that very light, that youth of our day will benefit from this program, build their capacities in the area of information and communication technology, and a whole lot that is happening. So in diverse areas, Nigeria benefited a lot from diverse areas, be it in the area of infrastructure, the breakthroughs, illicit financial flows. I was going to talk about that because it was...
Yeah, well, Cliff.
Okay.
Cliff, thanks a lot. We will get, of course, the other guys to respond to some of the other issues since they were also present. Thanks a lot for, the elaborate report that you have given to us. We'll come back to pop one or two other questions to you before we call it a day with you on the program. But we have a number of tweets that have also come in, and we're taking those tweets right now.
Okay, from Ibn Dominic, it said, the West can't let you benefit from them. Look deep. For every 10 naira you gain, they already add 100 naira. Neo-colonialism is still on the rise.
Ortega tweets again, it will be better for the Nigerian government not to run into the hands of these institutions. Debt cancellation means more debts. Therefore, be more careful.
And so from Ortega, World Bank and IMF are good in giving loans to countries that are rich in natural resources so that they will be able to control the markets.
And Tinubu Ayodeji tweets, what are the conditionalities given by the Bretton Woods institutions to help Nigeria out of recession? Is devaluation excluded?
Mark Brown Henry says, I don't think so. These bodies are not humanitarian bodies. What's their interest?
All right, so those are some of the tweets that were taken. Before we return to the Honorable Minister of Finance, we would like Dr. Tule, the Director of Monetary Policy of the CBN, to respond to this. There's a tweet now. They just talked about devaluation and the conditionalities for helping us out of our recession. Were these matters that came up at the meetings? If they were there any conclusions?
Let me say that the IMF is an institution that is continually reforming itself. We need to understand what conditionalities are. These are not issues that are discussed at the global level. I mean, that's the frame. It's within the framework of lending or of restarting economies when they're in crisis. So when the IMF visits a country, or when the country approaches the IMF, that look, we have a crisis on hand, we want to take a facility from you. The IMF would say, okay, look, for this facility, we've looked at your economy. These are the kind of reforms you need to carry out. It is those suite of reforms that we call conditionalities. They are not bad in themselves. They're simply telling you, for instance, if you want to borrow from a bank, the bank tells you, look, we've looked at your company profile, this and this and this is what you need to do. But I think let me just add this. One of the key issues that was discussed was increasing global non-performing loans, and that's across board. So it's not just here in Nigeria. I mean, in other countries, it's as much as 50% of non-performing loans. The issue of delisting and declining corresponding banking relationship, that's a very key issue, especially for countries in other regions and in Southern Africa in particular. It's a very big issue where commercial banks are losing their corresponding banking relationship. But that's not an issue for Nigeria. For us, we don't have that problem for now. But it was at the global level, it's become a big problem for developing countries. And at the meetings of the G24, the group took it headlong and provided very key concerns in the communique that it issued. The African Caucus also met, and there they articulated what they felt were their positions on issues affecting particularly sub-Saharan Africa central banks. Of course, we've discussed the issue of illicit capital flows, and this was again across border. Look, we have a position. You must do something about this. I had the Honorable Minister discuss this, and he said, look, you must put in place a framework for returning this money. It's not just the rhetoric of it, but we need the money. The money is there with you. When can we have the money back? And this developing countries were unanimous in their position about the illicit financial flows and the framework or the platforms around which these flows take place.
All right, Dr. Tule, thanks a lot. Well, of course, the Honorable Minister is right here, and then she will provide some elaboration on the aspect of illicit financial flows. President Muhammadu Buhari, when he was sworn in last year, did indicate that he was going to reach out to a number of influential capitals around the world where Nigeria's funds had been stashed, by those with light fingers. And here we are now, the IMF and World Bank being pushed. What exactly did we canvass, and what did we take away? Again, I mean, that's the phrase now. What did we take away? Is that a promise or a commitment to assuage the cries of those whose economies have been fleeced?
Yes, thank you. I was privileged to represent our caucus on the issue of illicit financial flows and took it up with both Dr. Kim and Madame Lagarde in the plenary session to say that, look, this issue of illicit financial flows cannot be a rhetoric. We cannot be coming to borrow when your same countries are sitting on money that has flown illicitly and has been with you for considerable periods of time. And one of the takeaways, for example, was the Swiss money, Abuja money, which the Swiss gave a condition, their court gave a condition. They've sat on this money for 17 years. Said, okay, to return it, they then said we should return it through the World Bank. And we said, look, when the money was going out, where was World Bank? Why now we want our money? You're putting conditions, more hurdles. So we addressed this frontally. And I think there's a general consensus in the West around how we need to stop illicit financial flows. The Panama Papers were an eye-opener. There is a growing movement that says, look, these things, the game is over. Those who have helped, because this money doesn't leave Africa physically. It goes into banks in these countries. And the really sad thing is they've used this money to develop their own country and developed it successfully. Now we need this money back. I haven't yet briefed Mr. President, so I don't want to speak about the initiatives to which we agreed would need to be rolled out in Nigeria. But what I would say is that there is going to be a major initiative that we believe will bring back significant money to Nigeria. It's been identified now that Nigeria is number 7 globally in illicit financial flows. This is money that has flown out of Nigeria, either proceeds of corruption, money on which tax wasn't paid, and just a base shifting by big companies where they make sure that in Nigeria they don't declare any profit, but they're selling goods here, but they make sure that the profit is almost zero, and then and use all sorts of financial instruments to take the money out. We're saying, look, the game has to be played fairly. There must be equity. If you do business in a country, if you benefit from a country, you must contribute by way of tax and by way of doing the right thing in those countries to that country's development. And I think there was a global consensus that we need to work together on this. But as I said, I do need to brief Mr. President and brief the EMT. But what I will say is there's going to be a fairly major initiative on repatriation of illicit financial flows.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much. We'll be back to you. And also, Malam Rufai in Sokoto, we'll come back to you. But before we do that, Cliff, of course, because we need to bring on another guest to actually take a look at some of these areas that we have mentioned talking about globalization as well as technology. But Cliff, before we let you go, I'm sure of interactions, of course, from your other colleagues from other media, as well as your own long reportage of coverage of this financial institutions. Now, the said and the unsaid, of course, so many are there. Now, let's take a look at international trade and cooperation having to attract conflicting positions, both for advanced economies as well as developing ones like Nigeria. What do you think we should be doing differently, or what would you be reporting differently from what the team Nigeria actually had to do there?
Thank you, Blessing. Well, talking about international trade and cooperation, in fact, President Obama of the United States set the tone at the plenary of this year's IMF-World Bank annual meetings on the need for nations to realize that we live in an interconnected world where we need one another to succeed. And if we don't cooperate, that we'll not be able to solve those problems that we have comparative advantage, over others, or maybe cash into the areas where the other nation have or has comparative advantage. But one other issue remains that the debt calculation mechanism was one issue that was raised at the Development Committee meeting of the World Bank. And the finance minister did raise issue, hold them to account on the calculation mechanism, of which the Vice President for Africa, the World Bank Vice President for Africa, Mokhtar Diop, commended Nigeria for taking it upon ourselves, to defend African developing nations in that regard. I'm sure she might want to talk more on that, elaborate on issues that were raised with regards to debt calculation mechanisms, because more often than not, the modalities they use might not be favoring the developing nations like Nigeria, and those things were brought into perspective. And the need for nations also to have a comprehensive approach to ensuring growth and development in their nations, having synergy in the area of fiscal, monetary, and structural policies. That it's only that way that we're able to put our economy on the path of growth and realize prosperity for all Nigerians and, of course, other member nations of that very country. Well, it was a very rewarding experience, so to say.
Well, Cliff, just we're going to have to release you now, but just before you go, and very briefly too, what is your take on the projection for slow growth right into 2017 against our own efforts to reflate our economy and get out of recession?
Well, actually, it was observed that for a long time, even developed economies have witnessed slow growth for quite some time. And the right steps, every person is looking up to emerging markets, because emerging markets is where the hope lies. They appear to have exhausted what they have in advanced economies. And the need for us to diversify our economy and present a better front away from commodities is the way to go that could help our nation, fast track its development projections. And we cannot achieve that unless we develop our infrastructure in terms of roads, energy, rail, and ICT, essentially, because once you do that, you'll be able to key into a global world that has gone digital in terms of economic operations. And once we do that, we know that we have the right power to negotiate. We're talking about illicit financial flows now because we lack capacity in certain areas to negotiate certain agreements, and we are shortchanged as a result of that. And we don't know the contracts you sign. Some nations will bring contracts to you, and all we do is just append signature, or some people will be engaged in that very negotiation, and what they do is, negotiate for their own interest, and that affects the nation generally.
All right, on that note, we'd like to thank Cliff Ayozie, Manager News and Head of Business and Economy, NTA News 24 is one of us, by the way, and a veteran of the IMF and World Bank spring and annual meetings. Cliff Ayozie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Okay. All right, now let's return to our guests, the Sokoto Network Center, Malam Rufai Shehu of the Department of Economics at Usman Danfodio University, also there in Sokoto. Malam Rufai, I would like you, to speak to the one point that the Honorable Minister of Finance elaborated on earlier with regard to the fact that, look, we have, as it were, the international environment is awash with cheap funds. We are desirous of ramping up our infrastructure, but at the same time, we are also weary as Nigerians, having experienced the debt crisis in the 80s and 90s, of going and borrowing. How would you advise that the proper balance is struck in this regard?
You know, membership of this international monetary institution also has a commitment. And if you look at it, each and every country as a member of this monetary institution has a quota which is supposed to be maybe a kind of money that should be deposited in its own account, maybe payable in foreign currency, one quarter of it, and the remaining quotas to be paid in the country's currency. These quotas, the actual money contributed by a country determines the role the country can play in this monetary institution. For example, the voting right for each country, and which means a voting right for a country that has contributed its quota based on its size in the comparison of our national economies, definitely will give it a say. Well, my point here, in most cases, is not the issue of claiming, all right, cheap funds that are there laying, waiting for Nigerians to make use of them. But the reality is, if you go by our own economy, definitely we have the means, without even going to IMF or World Bank, to source any kind of loan facility. It's not good for us. I don't advise Nigeria again and again to go for any loan if at all we cannot manage what we have in our own economy. Look at it now. Look at the infrastructures in Nigeria. They are dilapidated. Go by the roads, go to the hospitals, go to maybe what would I say, industries. So if you look at the national income identities of this country, nothing you can say is good for Nigerians. The level of investment, of domestic investment, is very bad. Level of consumption expenditure by the household, which can be used to finance investment expenditure, is very, very low. Now, if you take another thing which will bring about the importance of this international monetary institution, which is international trade and cooperation, Nigeria is nowhere to be found. What we have is an importation of almost everything we consume in this country. How can you now go when you are incapable of investing the resources you harness within your own economy and go for a loan? Believe me, what has taken place during the IBB, the debate that was taken in order to go to IMF and borrow money to invest in Nigeria for a structural adjustment program, and Nigeria seriously denied that opposition, that point, still, I believe, is the idea of Nigerians. What we want by our honorable minister and our president is for them to look at inward, to look at what we have in our country. How can we invest it? If we are successful in channeling the resources we have towards productive sectors of our own economy, then there are no cause for alarm if we go outside our environment to source more funding in order to invest into some other sectors that need international support. But when we have a country whereby people starch whatever is meant for the development of the same economy, and then we go out and borrow again for the same people to now take whatever is borrowed from these international monetary organizations, and then it will be taken. And that is the reason why most of these international organizations give conditionalities. And these conditionalities, as the other speaker said, are not bad, because they are the loopholes that are situated within our own economy. And even if it happens that we took the loan, if these structural imbalances are not corrected, definitely the loan will not be usable, even if it is without any interest. Assuming Nigeria now going to IMF or World Bank to access a loan facility to Nigeria with zero interest rate. But definitely after some years, if the money is to be refunded, you find that Nigeria will default. Why? Because some people decided to stash away or to loot whatever it is, because to some extent they will never be what? Caught. They will never be. And we have a list of Nigerians. Everyone's, even a layman, knows that this person has stolen so amount of billions of naira, and these people are still working, enjoying their loot, and nothing has been done. Then in this situation, definitely this country, I don't think it's of the interest of Nigerians to go out there and take whatever loan it is. Let Nigerians go and sit down and look at what our resources are, utilize them, put them or utilize them efficiently, and develop our own economy before we can go out and start looking for any kind of support from whatever international organization. And that is the reason why, if you look at it, Nigeria does not have a negotiating capacity in order to get whatever is looted out of the country because of our current condition.
All right, Malam Rufai Shehu of the Department of Economics, Usman Danfodio University, Sokoto. Thank you very much for your insight and your concerns. I'm sure the Honorable Minister will respond to that in the course of the discussion. Thank you very much. You joined us from Sokoto. We appreciate your company this morning. Okay, join us for the last phase of the conversation. We have Dr. Niron Oyekale, digital literacy advocate and also country representative, Setiport. Dr. Oyekale, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Yeah, quickly now, for global economy said to be on transition, driven by innovation and technology, of course. Globalization, technology, these are ways which economics of the world have prospered. But where is Nigeria in all of this, and also what support are we getting from the development institutions?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate Nigeria for coming this far, and the situation on ground that has thrown a lot of challenge at the entire nation. By the grace of God, at the end of the whole thing, I think Nigeria will come out stronger. But for the benefit of everyone, you see, Nigeria has sort of find ourselves in a situation whereby it's been difficult for us to build the blocks of innovations. And when you talk of the blocks of innovations, Nigeria deserves to have vibrant youth, able and skillful workforce. But all along the line, we've not been able to achieve this. Take for instance, we have about 50 million job seekers in Nigeria today. This is supposed to be a blessing to the entire world, because the world is looking at having the next generation of workforce to be about 75% of the world population. But what have we been able to do to turn this, our excess human capabilities, into global strength? Recession, there are a lot of theories people have been coming up with, but nobody is looking at the capacity building of the workforce. That, I believe, if we're able to put everything in order and ensure we train our people the way it's supposed to be done, sincerely speaking, we have more than enough to get out of this recession in a very, very short while.
Okay, Dr. Oyekale, thank you very much. But of course, we are pressed for time now, so this is the home stretch of the conversation. We have, let's take this comment from Dr. Tule of the CBN. While you were talking earlier, you referenced what the meeting discussed with regard to the global perspective on non-performing loans, as well as the erosion of correspondence with banks, particularly from the developing markets perspective. I would like you to speak to this. We have seen also a climb in non-performing loans in Nigeria, the portfolio of non-performing loans in Nigeria. Is the world getting into, as it were, a global crisis with regard to non-performing loans? That's the first question. Second question, Nigeria, we well know it's a largely import-dependent economy. How come, as it were, we are out of the loop of the cancellation of correspondence with banks? Does that tell us a healthy picture about what to expect?
Thank you very much, Kinsley. It's an issue of confidence in the ability of the country to meet its contingent liabilities. And so when we look at the global non-performing loan, and especially for sub-Saharan Africa, where the average for certain regions is extremely very high, or for some countries it's very high, we are just at about 10, 11, 12 for Nigeria. But if you look at global conditions where there's limited fiscal buffers, large-scale or widespread financial constraints, and elevated macro imbalances across board, is to show that the conditions we're experiencing in Nigeria are not Nigerian-centric. They are global conditions, and it's countries across the whole world that are experiencing it. Now, besides, you would also notice that coming from the global financial crisis, the banking system globally has exercised a very cautious approach to lending, and that is why you have global financing constraints. So investments globally are extremely very low, not just in Nigeria, but even in other countries. And if you look at what's happening in the Euro area, where there has been a recession from coming out of the global financial crisis and conditions in Japan, you would agree that despite the efforts of the central banks in these countries to re-stimulate or to restart growth by stimulating the economy through quantitative easing, the economies have not been able to pick up because banks are still very weary of extending credit for increased investments. So overall, I would think that what we have here is also part of a spillover from the rest of the world affecting us, and then part of our constraints, which has been imposed by the drop in commodity prices. And eventually, if the suite of macroeconomic policies are properly coordinated, we would certainly get out of it. If you look at the projection for growth for sub-Saharan Africa for 2016, we've dropped from about 5.6 about a couple of years ago to a projection of 1.3 for fiscal 2016. That's extremely very low. And that is because of the conditions we're experiencing in Nigeria. Because it was countries like Nigeria, Angola, Gabon, South Africa, and the rest of them that were able to anchor high growth for sub-Saharan Africa, even during the period of the global financial crisis. And now that we are really deep down there, that's why you see this reflected in the growth projections for sub-Saharan Africa. But if we put the entire suite of macroeconomic policies right, there's no reason why we would not restart growth, and you would see that reflected in the global sub-Saharan African figure.
All right. Honorable Minister, yes, you may wish to respond to some of the areas the guest had also touched. But quickly, too, because we know at the forefront of the drive for stimulating growth is the Nigerian youth at heart. You also met with the IMF director, MD, and one area he said is about innovative and technological global driving economy. How do you hope to achieve that, and how soon are we looking at?
Thank you. I think the first thing I'd like to quickly respond to is this impression that, you just go out borrowing. And we've always stated this Nigerian government strategy around fiscal was that we were going to consolidate. That is, we were going to deliver savings. We're going to be more efficient in what we're doing. That was number one.
All right, so